We're living in unfreedom. And believe me, we're the ones who produce the system. Going along with it is making the system possible to work. We have a choice to make. Are we going to live or are we going to die? Are we going to embrace life? Or are we going to embrace what is in effect spiritual death? The power of the dissident comes in his or her relentless affirmation of life by standing for the truth come what may.
Glenn, let me take you back to your day job as professor at Brown.
Okay.
Last spring, you conducted a seminar at Brown called, quote, Free Inquiry and the Modern World, close quote. And you were kind enough to send me the syllabus. And I showed that syllabus to my research assistant, who, by the way, is a recent graduate of Yale, Sister Ivy School of Brown. And my research assistant could hardly believe his eyes. He said, this is the most courageous syllabus I think I have ever seen. So could you just take me? I know the seminar lasted a whole semester at Brown, but I'd like to ask you a few questions. Tell me the significance. Tell me why the items I'm going to mention are on your syllabus. And by the way, seminar, you've described this as a seminar. How many kids were involved?
20.
So this is not a lecture class.
No.
There's nowhere to hide. You're running a conversation. You're calling on kids. They have to participate. All right. Socrates' apology. Quote, and this I'm quoting from Socrates, or I'm quoting from Plato's, you know what I'm quoting
Plato's
from.
apology of Socrates, yeah.
I prophesy to my murderers that after my death, punishment far heavier than you have inflicted on me will surely await you. For the noblest way of life is not to be crushing others, but to be improving yourselves. Close quote.
Yeah.
What do the kids make of that?
They loved it. I should mention David Sachs here, who was my teaching assistant, because this course, he's an undergraduate at Brown. He's a great concert pianist, and he's also reading Greek and Latin. He's a classics major at Brown.
You know, kids that smart really annoy me, Glenn.
And you know, he's a contrarian, and he walked into my office one day and he says, "You're one of the 2 or 3 professors around here I think's got his head on straight. Can I talk to you? Would you mind giving me some time?" This is just out of the blue a couple of years ago. He walked into my office. He said, I want to break free from the groupthink. Can you help me? So we put together a reading list, and we, over the course of a year, did an independent study, just him and me, reading some of the works that ended up in this course.
Oh, we'll come back to this course.
Yeah.
I really want to come back to the course. But wait, this kid is reading Greek and Latin. He's a smart kid. He got into Brown. He's reading Greek and Latin.
Yeah.
He plays the piano. He's smart and he's talented. And I want to break free of groupthink?
Yeah.
Why is a kid at one of the most elite institutions in the country feel shackled in his mind, intellectually subjected to group? How can this happen?
Now, this was a kid who thought that every Republican politician was not necessarily a fascist. This is a kid who thought that capitalism might not really be the road to hell. A kid who thought that while he's Jewish and not especially observant, religious people actually have a place within society. Isn't there something interesting about the fact that people constantly seek meaning in these mythological and you know, fanciful systems of belief? And what he's getting all around him in the dorm, at the lecture hall, in the classes, the other classes that he's getting is this kind of left of center, secular, ultra woke mantra he's getting. And he knows that it isn't quite right. It certainly doesn't hit his mind as being right. And he's looking for an alternative. And he found out, he followed my podcast a few times. His parents encouraged him because they follow the podcast. Go talk to Loury. And so he walks into an economist office to say, can you help me, can I breathe? I can't breathe around here. Can you help me get some fresh air?
I can't breathe. That's just...
Anyway, all I want to say is the course that you're referring to came about after that year of reading with David. And we sat together and said, we can make a course out of this. Why don't we? And you can be my TA, even though he was only his 3rd year. He's in his 4th year now. He's in his 3rd year, and there were seniors sitting in the class. So he was junior to some of the people whom he was TAing. But he's a crackerjack smart kid. They loved being challenged to think about, what does a philosophical life mean? What is an examined life? What was Socrates about, as Plato presents it in the dialogue? So it was scintillating. The questions, the discussion that went on within the class was really deeply rewarding. And I've gotten some tributes from students after the course who have written me saying it's best experience in my educational career by far.
Milton, Areopagitica, quote, "Give me the liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience above all liberties." The liberty to argue freely above all liberties.
This
What
is John
do
Milton.
the kids at Brown make of that?
Paradise Lost. Well, he's trying to inveigh against the idea that the Crown should license the printing of books. The printing press is 100 years old or so at the time he's writing. And books are pretty dangerous things, And he's saying, look, I don't want to live in a society in which political commissars decide what it is that I can read and what I can't read. There's freedom in those books. There's immortality, says Milton in that great essay in those books. You write a book that says something really important about life, you may die, but that book lives forever. As long as they don't ban the printing of the book. Keep your hands off my books.
Václav Havel, the dissident in Czechoslovakia, becomes president of Czechoslovakia after the communist regime falls. He writes a book called The Power of the Powerless. Quote, "In everyone there is some willingness to merge with the anonymous crowd and to flow comfortably along down the river of pseudo-life." So the kids read this and say, wait a minute, is Professor Loury to tell us we're all accommodationist?
No, they got it. They really did. And I love that essay by Havel, and I love that particular quote. So if your audience doesn't know, Václav Havel was a playwright and became president of the Czech Republic, was a dissident at the time that the Soviet Union was dominating political life in countries like Czechoslovakia. And he was a part of the underground samizdat producing critique of the status quo. And it was life or death. I mean, you could lose your livelihood. You could end up losing your freedom if you spoke against the party. So it was a very closed, very cloistered system. And people were being, betrayed by their loved ones and things like this because they weren't adopting the party line. And he says, we're dying over here. These are my words, but this is what he's saying. We're living in unfreedom. And believe me, we are the ones who produce the system. Going along with it is making the system possible to work. We have a choice to make. Are we going to live or are we going to die? Are we going to embrace life or are we going to embrace what is in effect spiritual death? The power of the dissident comes in his or her relentless affirmation of life by standing for the truth come what may. And you know what? That's more powerful than those tanks at the end of the day. This is Václav Havel. And the kids loved it. They could see the kernel of the idea, which is that the truth teller is a very subversive and a very dangerous fellow.
Glenn, one more from your syllabus. You entitle week number 12, The Case of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas, Mr. Justice Thomas, Supreme Court Justice. And you assign for that session Justice Thomas's memoir, My Grandfather's Son. Why? What do you hope for the students at this elite university to learn from his example?
A very interesting question, Peter. I'm so glad you raised it, because it's not necessarily what you would expect, which is these kids, they're pro-choice and in terms of abortion and
right.
They're, pro-gay rights and things like that. A conservative Catholic, long-serving jurist on the U.S. Supreme Court is an unlikely hero for them. My point was, you may agree or disagree with this or that opinion of the great Justice Clarence Thomas. Let me tell you about his life. Born off the coast of Georgia in one of those sea island situations where Geechee speaking and whatnot, dirt poor, scraped his way along, etc. You want a model of African-American heroism? You want an ideal of what it is that we should teach our kids to aspire to? I don't see how you could do any better than the life of Justice Thomas. But guess what? When the National Museum of African American History and Culture decided to stand up a museum, they didn't even have an acknowledgement of the existence of Clarence Thomas in it until people started complaining about that. And guess what? If you go to any liberal law school and you ask civil rights professors who teach about civil rights law what they think about Justice Clarence Thomas, they'll say he's a sellout and he's an Uncle Tom. And you can't find in Hollywood, you can't find in the TV scripts, you can't find in the novels that are being produced by these publishing houses any affirmation of the heroic character of this man's life. Why? He's a black conservative. He's off the reservation. He's thinking for himself. I had them, it's not on the syllabus, look at the film from that testimony that Thomas gave at his confirmation hearings, as I'm sure you're familiar with it, in which he very valiantly and powerfully affirms his right to think for himself. Justice Clarence Thomas was on my syllabus because he thinks for himself. He's iconic representative of the cost you pay for thinking for yourself. And I wanted my kids to be able to look at his life in the whole, not filtered through what the talking heads at MSNBC might have to say about it.